Hey everyone, welcome back to the Nine Show podcast. As always, it's Josue, and we're back at it, yos, after a while. I took a little bit of a hiatus. I've been taking the time to kind of update the show, kind of explore a couple other routes I can take within the show. And I've missed it though. I've missed actually sitting down and recording. I've just kind of been editing and writing, and that can be fun, but it actually gets kind of boring though sometimes after doing it constantly and constantly. And for those of you guys who have seen the updates on the Facebook and the Instagram, I kind of promised that by the 5th and the 6th, which today's the 5th, I would have everything completely done. And sitting down today as I'm recording this and working on what I've done, the progress is there, but the meeting of that date gets ever more elusive. I kind of underestimated how much there was going to be to do. And I might be working deep into the hours of the night tonight and tomorrow in order to get that. But if nothing else, I'll have for you guys the new content ready to go. So those are going to be those 3 episodes. And then there'll be probably an additional one. And then what's left of all the updates of the old things to do for coming in the future, probably within like the next few days after August the 6th. But it's coming, it's coming. And I mean, I'll be explaining through the days and through the episodes of all the things that have been coming out, but I'll spread it out, and I'll start off by saying that even though I'm still calling this the Nine Show Podcast, you guys are going to see on Podbean. I think by now I should reflect it on iTunes because iTunes takes about 2-3 days to update or something like that after you make changes on your main host, which is Podbean in this case. But I've retitled the show or the podcast itself the Night Show Network, and the reason for that is that I'm trying to make this, and I've changed the description in order to reflect it. But ever since day one, this was actually going to be a all-in-one podcast because I can't naturally I almost can't stick to one subject. It's probably a symptom of my ADD, but I can't. I'm interested by so many different things that I want to go in so many different directions. So within the Night Show Network, you can think about it as it's going to be a channel in the sense that we're going to have. It's all one podcast, but we'll have different subjects, and each will be titled in its own way. I mean, some of the titles that I've been throwing around with have been the Nine Show Bites, which will be kind of like our random episodes about different subjects, which this is one of them about fragrance. There's one that's coming out, which is going to be done probably either later today or tomorrow, which is going to be about JDM, which refers to the Japanese car scene and how that's kind of influenced us here in the United States, which it has been very impactful. And there's a whole history with that and to that kind of starts with Fast and the Furious and even goes on before that. So there's a whole lot to talk about there. So that'll be another one. Another title that I've thrown around is Nights Under the Blood Moon, which is going to be our dedicated horror podcast, which I haven't actually done a lot of those lately, but I want to actually start getting back to that because there's another podcast from the Spokane area called the Ouija Broads, which refers to Ouija boards, and they talk about horror topics, but they kind of give it in a lighter tone. They're really funny to listen to. I'd actually recommend you guys go check them out on Podbean or wherever else you guys get your podcasts from. So that's the Ouija Broads. They're from the Spokane area, and they're actually someone that I would like to potentially have on the show and actually be on the show in the future. So we'll see. I mean, the theme of next season is to potentially have a lot more guests, possibly even have just 9 episodes of straight guests, just from start to finish. As you know, it all depends as far as how well I can book those people. But we do have some already on deck, like I mentioned in the update that I posted to Facebook and Instagram. So potentially that could become a reality pretty soon. So not to dwell on this too much, but more updates to come throughout these new episodes that are coming to close out what we have left of season 2 at the end of this summer, which has been a crazy one. Western Washington has earthquakes. Central Washington is on fire. California has earthquakes. Yeah, it's just like all over the place. But we're still here, which I think that's something always to be thankful for. It's never as bad as it could be. So I think that's always something to keep in mind. So there's already a blog post published on my WordPress blog, which you guys can find through the link on my splash page, which, like I say at the end of the episodes, is going to be listed and linked at the bottom. There you can find all the links to pretty much everything else that I do on the side as far as social media and, like the blog writing and other things which are going to be coming out in the future. But the reason why I wanted to do an episode on this is because fragrance is always something that I've actually pretty much, really enjoyed. I When I tend to like something, I tend to nerd out about it in a lot of ways. I mean, like on top of, like I'm into comic books, I'm into films, I'm into cars, but I'm also into fashion. I'm also into fragrance. I'm into the shoe game, and this in and itself, the fragrance community as it is calls this the fragrance game because there is a lot of facets to it. If you go on YouTube, there's an entire community of creators who actually focus all their content towards that, recommending different scent types, different fragrances, all kinds of different brands for both men and women. The big creators that come to mind include Demi Rawling, Bretta Lessence, The Big Beard Business, Brooklyn Fragrance Lover, Jeremy Fragrance, and the Fragrance Brothers. They all create quality content that is geared towards specific crowds, mostly geared towards guys, but they have things that are geared towards women as well, especially Demi Rawling and Jeremy Fragrance. They have videos dedicated to women's fragrances. But I mean, it's something very personal, I think. It's something that you can really help to actually build your personal style with, which I think is interesting. I think fragrance is something that people tend to overlook and just how important it is. It's not to say that it's make or break, but I know people have said that a bad smell can contribute to a bad first impression and ongoing impressions if that's something that keeps happening. And it's not only just in terms of attraction of a partner, but it's in terms of the professional world, job interviews, just in general interactions. It's something that can actually help to sort of upgrade your game in that sense. And it's always been something that I enjoyed. I remember kind of always being around people in the family that smelled good. And at that point, when I was younger, I didn't really know anything about brands, names, and what. I think the first time that I actually came to encounter like a specific name brand and I knew that that was supposed to be like quality was when I encountered Calvin Klein Euphoria. I remember that my dad had a bottle of that back in the day. And I remember that that smelled really good. And I actually mentioned on the blog post that I think actually even before that it was Villain by Ed Hardy, but they must have been in and around the same time, I think. But yeah, those two kind of helped to create the foundation of like sort of my journey, like getting into fragrance. And then not until really I was in my late teens and in my 20s when I started to actually really explore. I don't remember how I found the fragrance community. I just kind of stumbled into it, and then I remember it just got really cool, just kind of learning about the different brands, the different houses, the different types of scents, the different types of scent characters, the notes, because there's like all kinds of to it. I mean, there's all kinds of things to it. Just to be a perfumer, I guess that seems kind of cool. In the same way that I could see being a barber is kind of cool, kind of being anything sort of like that, being a tailor, being a cobbler. Those are very like niche skills, but they're unique, and it's something that almost everyone can appreciate. It's almost something that everyone appreciates. I think most people wanna look good, wanna smell good, wanna create good impressions with people. So it's something that all of us kind of intersect, no matter if we're coming from the arts, if we're coming from STEM, if we're coming from just any field. Something that most people can share a experience in and a positive experience in. And believe it or not, there's actually really complex and long-standing history that has gone into fragrance and perfumery dating back to thousands of years ago. So this is not just a modern thing. People were getting just as hyped and just as interested as we are now back then. The form was different. The process was more esoteric, perhaps, but now we created in mass. In mass, typically the scent is not as pure, which I'll get into going forward. But yeah, like there's a lot of long-standing history. I mean, if you look at some of the evidence that has been found, apparently dating back to between 4000 and 5000 BC in the country of Cyprus, which is where the earliest mention of perfumery can be found, an excavation that was conducted between 2004 and 2005 found evidence of Bronze Age factories that produced scented oils and fragrant products. So people back then were already starting to create it at a larger scale. It wasn't just sort of an individual type thing. The Bible actually describes a sacred perfume recipe in Exodus chapter 30, verse 22-33, consisting of liquid myrrh, fragrant cinnamon, fragrant cane, and cassia. And it was so sacred, apparently, that it was forbidden outside of the use of the priests, which is kind of interesting. Also, certain pieces of cuneiform, which is the old Mesopotamian form of writing dating back to 1200 BC, have been analyzed, and they mention a Mesopotamian woman by the name of Taputi Belatekalim, who is recorded actually as being the first equivalent to what we would consider to be a chemist today. And the title of Belatech Halim refers to the overseer and the administrator of a house. So she was working with the royals. She was working with the distinguished members of society, attempting to create things that would actually make them to be more distinguished and, more so members of high society. And one of these things that would allow a person to actually become into that that realm, to move into that level, would be the quality of their smell. So she actually had a recipe where she created a fragrance oil that consisted of flowers, natural oils, calamus, cyperus, myrrh, and balsam. And she added water to that. And actually, that's the first listed evidence of a still. So the process of distillery is something that comes from Taputi. And she, was not only creating, in essence, not only created fragrance oils, but also created one of the modern processes for alcohol, which in mass is a industry that is much larger than fragrance in itself. But it's alcohol, so it's gonna be big. It's it just is what it is. Going forward, the Islamic cultures and the rise of Islamic civilizations continue to contribute to the idea of perfumery that we would actually come to discover in the West a couple centuries later. The main two contributions that they made were the perfection of extracting fragrances through steam distillation and introducing new raw materials. Both of these would come to influence the greater development of perfumery, which came to the West in the 14th century, where we actually saw the creation of the first modern perfume in Hungary, which was a blend of scented oils and an alcohol solution, which was commissioned by Queen Elizabeth of Hungary in 1370. And it actually got popular in Europe almost as soon as it came out, and it was actually known as Hungry Water, which you can actually start to see like the naming processes that we have with colognes now. We have colognes called Manor Fresh Water and sort of things like that. So they started to become, because now when we associate cologne and fragrance, it's always by name. It's called, Bleu de Chanel. It's Miss Dior. So yeah, it's like they started to name them. Whereas before, it's unclear if they actually, this was this. This might have just been pure scent of jasmine or pure scent of lavender. But now you actually have dedicated names, which, I mean, we function a lot in brands, in brand names. So it was clear that it was going to go down this path. The next major place that perfumery would show up would be in France, and the French quickly became addicted to that idea and to that notion. As soon as perfumes hit the court of King Louis XV, the royals were all over it. I think actually I read that court was actually called Court de la Perfume, I think is actually what it says. People were known to be like smelling extravagantly good just all over the place. I mean, going a little bit after that, Napoleon Bonaparte is said to actually have used 60 bottles of pure jasmine extract a month, which in his case screams overcompensation. But I mean, Napoleon is one of the guys that they always say as being a good contender for the appearance of the Antichrist. So I mean, while the people, are starving and such, he's spending the nation's purse on their extract for himself. I mean, come on now. But yeah, perfume. And then not much after that, scents and perfumery would come to America, and then the rest is history. Fast forward about 200 years, and where we are now, the structure of fragrances has come to actually be controlled by brands. Like I was saying, the sort of the you started to see the foundation with Hungry Water of names belonging to specific brands, and now that's how we know them. Within the fragrance game itself, they like to call them by houses. So I mean, there's all kinds of houses just all over the place, just dealing in different kinds of tastes, different types of concentrations, and different types of just scents in general. I mean, some of the most prolific ones or well-known ones you could say are the House of John Barbados, the House of Mont Blanc, the House of Chanel, the House of Dolce and Gabbana, the House of Dior. I mean, if you're looking for a scent that is a little bit closer to that of the ancients, then you have to start looking into niche houses. And usually those niche fragrances are a lot more expensive. I'm talking about 2 to 3 times more expensive than the designer fragrances, which are typically like those other houses that I mentioned. But if you're looking for that, if that's something that you're actually able to afford, then the houses you want to look into are Bond Number 9, Creed, Killian, Amouage, Parfums de Marly, Parfums del Rey, Imaginary Authors, and others like that. Because of the reason that a lot of these companies create more pure scents, like higher concentrated scents, like I was saying. I mean, if you're looking for, Napoleon's bread and butter, his his pure jasmine extract, you can probably find a pure jasmine extract scent. If you would like to smell like the scent of pure rose, you can find the scent of pure rose and pure amber, pure wood, pure anything. There's some weird ones out there too. I remember I heard of one that has supposed to be like the smell of it's like the smell of blood or something. It's like I don't understand how that's attractive, but I mean, there's something for everyone out there in every price range, basically. And talking about the concentrations, it's important to understand going deeper and deeper into fragrance that not all formulations and not all concentrations are created equal. They're created different, and typically, though that's a correlation with its price. Sometimes it's not. There's sometimes some that are lower concentration that actually tend to last longer, and that's because of the fact that no matter what people say, it's always important to try fragrance on yourself first before you make a conclusion about this being, oh, this is your favorite or this lasts forever. It's because we all have a natural scent, a natural concentration of oil on our skin, which can be either, I would say, helpful or detrimental to specific scents, because our specific oils might break down that scent more, or our specific oils will actually bolster that scent. So it's important to try a couple different ones and then kind of decide what works for you. But as a general outline of things that you can follow with about, let's say, 85% certainty, I've kind of prepared a list of the different concentrations and different percentages of oil, because that's the way that you have to understand all of these. A fragrance is rated based off its relative concentration of pure oil mixed with its relative concentration of pure alcohol, because whereas back in the day, like I said, they were creating pure scented oils, which was, as close to as literally, covering yourself in roses, or, Napoleon Bonaparte's signature scent, pure jasmine. I don't know why I think this is so funny, guys, but anyways, but they're all rated relative to that concentration. So, back then they were starting to mix them with water, but it wasn't until the modern formulation of Hungry Water, back in 1370, where they actually started to mix it with, water and alcohol solutions. And we've kept that same formulation base all the way through. Don't know if any scents are created with another base outside of alcohol. I think alcohol is kind of necessary in order to actually keep your skin safe, because I think if you have a concentration that's too high, I think that's actually bad for your skin. Like if you were to put like 99%, you know, amber oil on your skin, like in a larger quantity, like the way that we tend to spray, it wouldn't actually be good for you. It'd actually be damaging your skin in a way. But, if we're starting from, in an ascending order, The very first of these is called El Fraiche, or aftershave, and El Fraiche means fresh water, essentially. So it's meant to be a fresh scent, kind of a fresh out of the shower scent. And an aftershave is kind of like that. It's kind of to freshen up like the area that you've actually, gone over and somewhat damaged with the razor. These have 3% pure oil. And typically, in terms of staying power, these will last you 1 or 2 hours. I'll mention one later that actually lasts a little longer, but they're not meant to particularly be your all day things. These are just kind of like your quick run to the grocery store type scents, which you wear after the shower to kind of enhance how clean you smell. But they're not meant to be like your end all be all type scent. After that, you have El de Cologne, which those have 3 to 8% pure oil. Typically, these will last you 2 to 4 hours, but the good ones can actually last you 5 to 5.5 hours on average. So there we have a step up. So as you're gonna start to see a trend of or climbing up the ladder, starting to find different types where they'll actually last you a lot longer. Now, the first of like the main categories of like the good performers would be El de Toilette, and that is 5 to 15% pure oil. Now, on average, these will last you a minimum of 4 to 6 hours. I know of some that will last you more. Those sometimes can go between 7 and 8 hours for like the really good ones. Some just tend to last. I mean, in this, what's awesome actually is one that I'd recommend. Lucky You by Lucky Brand. It's I've never seen it more than $17 for the 3.4 ounce bottle, which is actually it's a lot. It doesn't sound like a lot, but in terms of fragrance, it is. You can get bottles sometimes up to 10 ounces, but I mean you're playing up sometimes above $150 for those. But for the 3.4 ounce, $17 is not bad at all. And that is an EDT. It's a fresher smelling EDT, but it actually has more of a masculine undertone, and that one can last you like 7 hours, sometimes 8 hours. Some people say like some people have reported like spraying it like once in the morning when they go to school, and by the time usually at your school day will last you altogether between 8 and 10 hours on average. You come back and you still smell like it, so that's one of those outliers. Definitely won't be all EDTs, but some definitely will last you. Now we have Eau de Parfum, which is shortened as EDP, which is 15 to 20% pure oil. Now, almost all of these are going to last you at least 6 hours, and a lot of them are going to last you 8. Now, this is definitely the one that is used more for occasion based. You can wear an EDP during the day, but typically they're more expensive, so typically they're more like for professional events, or if you're going to go out at night, if you have a certain encounter at night, it's one that you probably want to wear for that. But yeah, these are starting to actually be like the long lasting ones, and typically like a lot of the famous ones that that you see and mention, like I'll talk more about these later, but Blue Dead Chanel, Allure Homme Sport, Dior Sauvage, all of those are really famous in the EDP concentrations, but like I said, not all of them are going to necessarily last as they're listed or be more so because they're EDP. I mean, I know for sure that Dior Sauvage EDT is actually better performing than EDP, so they always say if you're going to buy, because right now Sauvage is like the hype beast. It's the one that kind of rules the game. I think it's currently, or was, or it was until very recently the highest selling male fragrance of all time. Although actually it does get thrown around. There's like four that get thrown around, and it's kind of rotating always. It's between Acqua di Gio by Armani, Cool Water by Davidoff, Bleu de Chanel, and then Sauvage. And then also, I think Acqua di Gio Profumo, which is the new version, it's like the darker version of Acqua di Gio, is up there too. But it's always rotating because I mean, you can see when you go to your local Macy's or when you go to any place that sells scents, there's just so many of them that it's not like there's only five, so people have to go to five. There's 500 easily or more throughout the world because there's a lot of scents that are not even sold in the U.S., which are very popular in their respective countries. So it's an all world thing that's been around for so long. So like I said, going back 5,000 years, so it's had time to go through many iterations, and people have what they like. But since we're all individual, we're all unique. that kind of goes down to our smells as well, like what we enjoy. So there's been time to actually have designed different scents that at their times were like the kings or the queens in terms of female fragrance, but they get dethroned and they're throned again because what might be popular today, it stops being popular tomorrow, but then a year later it'll be popular again. So it's kind of gone through many iterations over time. And the last category would be perfume or parfum, which would be like the male equivalent. Now, this is the strongest widely available version of a fragrance out there, which would have a oil concentration of 20 and 30%. Now, in almost all cases, these are going to last you at least 8 hours. And usually that's because of the money that you're paying for them. Like, these typically are sold by those niche brands, like I said, like Killian, Amouage, Creed. Those will last you that long, but the drawback is a lot of times you're paying 300, 400, 1,000, 5,000. It's something like $5,000 or $10,000 per bottle for like the really obscure ones, which I think that's a bit much. I mean, if I can't tell you how to spend your money, but I feel like that's kind of a bad way to just to, smell like pure. I'm gonna say it again, like pure jasmine. But these actually, like I said, will last you at least 8 hours. But now people have reported them being so strong and actually maintaining a strong sillage, which means it's a French word that means quality of projection. So that's like, when people have the reaction where it's like you were walking down the street and you smelled her from like 5 or 10 feet away because the sillage was so strong. Now, some people like that, some people don't like that. I've heard both reactions from people there. It's like people want to be able to have someone that smells a little bit more subtle so they come closer to them. But some people like the sort of extroverted factor where it's like you smell, like you saw them walk down the road and you know that they're there because of how they smell. I think somewhere in the middle is good. I don't think you want to necessarily announce yourself in the middle of the crowd and like everyone knows that you're there. But I don't think you necessarily want something that's super, super, super subtle to where it's like they don't smell it. I think maybe a sillage of like 2 to 3 feet I think is ideal, where it's not screaming that you're there, but you're also not unknown at the same time, with it. But people have actually reported these lasting 12, 16, sometimes 24 hours later that they still have the smell, which is weird because I guess you would have to factor in a day where you don't take a shower. It happens. Some nights you don't. But some people have reported actually waking up and they still smell that. So a full 24 hours later and it's still there, or on a piece of clothing or something, then it's still there. So that's actually, like I said, the widest available, highest concentration of perfume and parfum. That isn't the highest though that actually has ever been made. I've heard of actually certain companies, very rare, very obscure companies or private makers. If I know that it's a big thing actually in the Middle East to get a scent made completely custom, since perfumery is very much from that area of the world. People still know the old ways, the way of the ancients of how to actually combine the pure perfume oils in very high concentrations with water and maybe minimum alcohol, where they're actually creating scents that are sometimes up to 60% pure oil. Now that will last you days under the right circumstances. But that's very rare. I don't know if you can widely buy a bottle of pure extract of jasmine in the United States. Okay, I'll stop. This is the last time I mention it. But in the United States, like just at the store, I think you would have to go through private buyers, and if you know your sources, then that's where you would end up buying them. And to get things started here, just a little bit. There it is. It's the Church of Eight Wheels. Come on down. Let's get things rolling. And now I kind of want to end this quick episode, by throwing out some recommendations. I have not tried every scent out there. There's so many, like I said, that it'd almost take a lifetime to really know. And, on a college budget, I can't afford to buy all the really big ones, neither would I if I could afford it. I think there's other ways to spend your money, although I think this is an interesting hobby to have. It's not a hobby. No hobby should ever break your bank 100%. I think there's definitely better uses of your money out in the world. That's why, before I get into it, I want to recommend ways that if you want to start getting into fragrance, to do it the smart way. Because you definitely, like they say, you don't have to spend $1 million to look like $1 million. You don't have to spend $1 million to smell like $1 million either. Definitely try your discount retailers. Go to your Mervyn's. I'm actually not sure if Mervyn's still exists, but at one point it did. Mervyn's, Marshall's, Ross, TJ Maxx. What's another? Burlington Coat Factory. All of those are gonna almost always deal in fragrances, and actually not just like throwaway fragrances either. They're gonna have like popular ones sometimes, like for like $10 or less, if you wait for the right time. I mean, sometimes they'll have niche ones, like in certain cities, like big cities like LA, Seattle, Portland. Sometimes you'll find like big, like sometimes niche fragrances too that are like way cheaper than they would be. They're sometimes still expensive, but relative cost to what they are. Like I remember one time in a Ross in California, Ontario, they had a bottle of a fragrance called Terre de Hermes, which is one of those niche ones, and it was on sale for $90 for the 4-ounce bottle, 4.2-ounce bottle, which is still expensive. At that price I still wouldn't buy it, but the original price is like $270, I think, so it was deeply discounted, more than 50% off. So I mean, that's a pretty good deal if you can afford it. If shopping in person is not your thing, then you can always try your online discounters. You have Fragrance Net, Fragrance X, Notino if you're in Europe, Fragrantica. I don't know if they actually sell directly on Fragrantica, but you can get links to other places from there. What's cool about Fragrantica though is that they break down all like the notes and everything. So if you really want to be like a connoisseur of fragrance, then you can break down everything, every single fragrance by note there too. So always go through those first. I mean, if you don't mind paying the extra $1, I guess what's kind of cool about like places like a Macy's and stuff like that, like if you haven't tried a scent yet, then you go and you try those, and if you want to buy it at the moment, because sometimes they have sales, it's not like they always sell full price, but just in my experience most times it's like full price. But if you get a sale, go ahead and buy it. If you tried it, you really liked it, you buy it at the moment, you take it home with you, you don't have to wait for shipping or whatever. I mean, that's the disadvantage of the Rosses and stuff, because they're fully sealed, and then if you haven't smelled it yet, you just heard a recommendation like, oh, I think this is really good, and then like, oh, it's gonna end up being a blind buy most of the time, unless if you have experience with it. But yeah, I mean, like definitely that's how what I typically do is like when I go to the Macy's or when I go to the Kohl's or the JCPenney, is like I'll present myself there in the fragrance section, and then like I'll end up coming out with like 30 of those 30 of their little fragrance papers, because I'm smelling every single one. I'm like, okay, so later on when I actually see one like at way cheaper, then I'll buy it at that time, at the Ross and stuff, if I actually see it there. But yeah, it's kind of one of those things I like doing when I show up to those stores. They're just like trying like all the ones, and it's like, oh yeah, this is good, this is good, this is good. A lot of them are just like so good. Like if you're someone like me that just really enjoys fragrance as it is, I think it's just fun to go out and just try different ones, when the opportunity presents itself. But getting into like the recommendations, I want to start off with some honorable mentions. They're honorable mentions in my case because I don't have these, so I've never been able to really try them like in mass to tell you like, oh, this one lasts a long time, or this one is good for this or whatever. But I mentioned this one before, but Bleu de Chanel, really good, really good smelling one. What I like about Bleu de Chanel is that it really has a clear masculine smell, but it's backed up by very earthy and like natural tones. It's really creative. It smells like wood, it smells like fresh water, it smells like shrubbery, which might not be the best word, but I mean it's all combined, and it's like it's masculine in a very natural way, I think, if that makes sense. So it's actually a really good smelling cologne. Allure Homme Sport may be the Eau Extreme version, which is kind of the longer lasting one. There's also like 2 other ones, but it could be any Allure Homme Sport. Also another masculine smell. It's by Chanel, so typically the Chanel fragrances are a little bit more expensive. Even though they're designer ones, they're still not cheap. I want to say that Allure Homme Sport is actually even more expensive than Bleu de Chanel, and Bleu de Chanel is one of those that I'm saying is one of like the highest selling ones ever. But Aluram Sport, I guess, has become very popular. And I think what makes it like so valuable is the fact that it's definitely a masculine sporty scent. It's kind of backed up by citrus notes. That's what hits you right away. But it's one of those that can be used all year in pretty much every situation. Bleu de Chanel, I think you can. It won't perform that well for you in the colder months. It's not really designed for that. It's more of a summer scent as far as I'm aware. Now Aluram Sport though, because it has those masculine notes, they actually mixed it on the back end, the dry down, with like kind of tonka and coffee notes, which those are notes that are definitely designed for the winter. Which I guess, kind of going off on a quick tangent, typically like your fresh notes, your citrus notes, your not woody notes, but like your water notes, those are going to be more for their summer fragrances, the spring fragrances, and then your coffee notes, your sweet notes, your alcohol notes, so like rum, sometimes like more male floral notes are going to be used more in the winter fragrances, kind of a deeper type smell. It's different, so it's good to explore some for the summer, some for the winter, but there's the cool ones that intersect, and then you can use them all year, which I'll mention some of those a little bit later. But kind of going into some of my personal favorites that I actually have been able to use and find for cheap, which, you know, that's typically when I find them for cheap and then I like them, that's when I'll get them, you know, like at the right time, waiting for the right moment to strike, as they say. But John Barbados Dark Rebel, now this is one of my personal favorites, and this one's kind of, it can be polarizing to people, and people that talk about it in reviews will say it, but it smells like a forest fire, which might not make sense, but it smells like that in a good way, because it has deep notes of rum, dark woods, and smoke, and a very masculine undertone. Now, like I said, this one is one that can be polarizing. People will really like it, and some people won't. One of the main creators of the fragrance community that I mentioned earlier, Demi Rowling, though, she actually called it by her words masculinity in a bottle, and Demi Rowling is gorgeous, let me tell you, so I'm down to believe what she says, and I've tried it myself, and I think it does smell really good too. But yeah, it's also, Jeremy Fragrance actually called it Jack Sparrow in a bottle too, like where it's saying like it's kind of like the smell of a rebel, really, because Jack Sparrow is, yeah, kind of like the ultimate rebel in a way. But definitely, I would say, if you want to look into this one, do not overspray this. Especially if you're going to be in a crowded room, like if you're going to take this into a school setting, do not overspray this. You're going to offend people because it is strong. It doesn't have the longest lasting performance, as it goes about 6 hours being an EDT, but it's a very solid 6 hours. It'll be present from, minute 1 of hour 1 all the way to, minute 59 of hour 6. So it's good. Really, all you need with this is 3 pumps, maybe 2 in a widespread, just, 1 on the chest, 1 on the back maybe, and that's it. You can add 1 more, you can distribute it however you want. There's not really a set way to spray fragrance, but yeah, make sure that you just do minimum pumps and you'll do just fine with this one. And what's good about this one too is this is definitely a winter scent. Don't try it in the summer. Like I said, you're gonna offend people too if you do, because the idea is to smell good but not to overpower at the same time, I think. Like I said, you'll do just fine with 3 pumps. And what's good about this one is that the colder it gets, the better that it gets. I feel like being in Washington, where in the winter, in the deep winter, we're talking December, January, sometimes February even, walking around during the day like at sub 20 degrees, sometimes low teens, single digits, walking around in a thick coat and everything. This is the time to really look into deep scents like that, because it's going to project well, it's going to smell good, and it's going to smell subtle if you're using it in the right concentration. If you use it too much, yeah, this will be like the times when you actually get spotted like from like 20 feet, but not in a good way. So yeah, John Barbados Dark Rebel. Next up on the list here is Versace Eros, the god of love. So this opens up with notes of mint and apple, and it dries down to a more masculine sort of combo, which is actually really pleasing to the nose in most cases, and it's pretty effective. I feel like this is actually one of those that, like I was mentioning earlier, is like the all season, all occasion, kind of like the elusive title of those. There's only a few out there I really think that can really work in all seasons, all occasions. But yeah, I think this is just as effective as it is in the deep winter as it is in the deep summer. Maybe in the summer you spray a little less just because like this, your sweat's naturally gonna mask some of it, but it'll still be present. I think there you enjoy more of the freshness of it. In the winter, you enjoy a little bit of the sweeter parts of it, like the mint and the apple, but or the green apple. But in either season, it works really good. And actually, this is one of those like contenders for the title. If you only wanted to have 1 cent, let's say, for any occasion, any season you wanted to keep buying this would be a strong contender for that, because this is pleasing to a majority of people. It's pleasing to yourself. It smells really good, I have to say. One of my personal favorites. Yeah, it would definitely be a strong contender for that. And like I said, in mythology, Eros is the god of love, so am I saying that it'll make people fall in love with you? No, it's not that simple. But it might help you in that respect, and every little advantage helps in that field, I think. So. And another one here, our last one up, is another one by Versace, and that is Versace Pour Homme Man au Fraiche, which is the namesake of this episode. Pour Homme means for men, and Man au Fraiche means man of fresh water, essentially. So I think this is actually probably the best dumb reach fragrance that I've ever smelled, and what I mean is like without even trying it beforehand, I got a little sample of it, and it smells really good. It's listed as an EDT, but it performs more like an El Fraiche in the sense that it lasts sub 3 hours, sometimes maybe 2.5, but it's relatively cheap. So like in theory, you could buy a lot of bottles of it and not be too much in the hole as far as price. What makes it better though than a lot of like the shower gel type, because a lot of El Fraiches, like I said, are shower gel esque. They smell like just you being fresh and clean, but they added deeper sort of wood and musk notes to it, and which made it a lot more mature smelling, a lot more complex smelling. So this is one of those it would be kind of like a very high end shower gel, I guess, if no other way to describe it. Now also musk, a lot of people might be concerned about that because back in the day, musk actually used to be from deer musk, which is not animal friendly at all, but nowadays, as far as I'm aware, no actual fragrance companies use natural musk. They use sort of a really high end replicant of musk, so it's a synthetic musk, so it smells good. Yeah, just as good as a real thing, but minus the animal cruelty. So if people are worried about that, don't worry about that. You're not contributing to animal cruelty. And to finish out here, a couple recommendations for the ladies. Now, I am admittedly not as well versed in female fragrance as I am in male fragrance, but I know of a couple which do smell nice. A majority of the Victoria's Secret scents, there was one specifically, and I think it was like a blueberry pomegranate that I encountered once, and I thought that was like, oh yeah, that smells really nice. Because typically this is associated more like with guys and saying like, oh, to impress their girl, like one of the things you can do is smell nice, but we appreciate that too, actually, on girls. Like I'd say, I do appreciate that when a girl smells really nice. There are like specific scents. Typically, female scents are more fruity, more floral, but that smells nice. That's pleasing. That's just pleasing to the nose. Lacoste Pour Elle French Panache. That's actually a really nice smelling one, and Pour Elle in French is for her, so it's a female, denoting female fragrance. And this one smells really nice. It's like floral, but it's a little bit deeper. It's a little bit deeper. I remember I encountered that one once too, and that was actually really nice. It's like if a girl smelled like that, that would be actually like a really nice smell. And another last one, which is Carolina Herrera Good Girl. Now that one is sexy, I gotta say. That's a sexy smell. It's like I said, it's floral, but it's even deeper than French Panache. It's just good. Like it's good. It just something that there's always something like when something smells good, you can't deny it. Like it's there. It's there. We all have our specific opinions, but this one just checks all the boxes for a good female fragrance. I think this smells really, really nice. So yeah, I mean like that's my episode on fragrance, guys. Like I had mentioned in the blog post that I wanted to do one on it. In closing out here, we're gonna go a little bit off topic, but like I said, I always want to end the episodes with some sort of positive affirmation or just some sort of message I think related to things going on in the world. And I want to address the shootings that went down in Texas and Ohio. And I never seek to sound preachy. I never seek to make it seem like I know the solutions to things. Because I wish I did, but it's like sometimes things are not so cut and dry. Some things are not black and white. I've heard a lot of people say that a lot of times it's more effective to think about things in terms of grays, so the middle grounds, which it's a little shocking sometimes to hear, but I mean, maybe they're right. It's just, I think that we need to learn to have more effective and useful dialogues. I mean, you guys can go look up the circumstances of the shooting, but it was, at least in the Texas one, it had to do with racial things. I know the guy said that he felt he was being personally attacked by immigrants and stuff. But we have to be more direct in the issues that we think we have with people, but at the same time we have to be more compassionate. Cause I don't think any issue on a surface level, and what I mean by surface level is that if someone is attacking your family personally, and very obviously personally, I mean, if you have to kill in self defense to maintain their livelihood, then, okay, I see that. But just out of like the offense of them being there and they're not causing you any direct trouble, I don't think, like I said, on the surface level, that's never worth taking a life or lives in mass. In this case, I mean, I think in the Texas shooting, like 20 people died. I'm not too sure about the Ohio one, but I can't see a situation where it'd be worth killing, in mass, just for feeling threatened and such, without any clear and present danger, as I'd say. And I think that being a rock in the face of adversity and being stoic in a lot of situations, it can be a very admirable quality because you can keep a cool head. So I would recommend that people, as often as you can, make your decisions with a cool head. If you go into situations with a hot head, which, I mean, I've gone into situations with a hot head too, and then I immediately regret what I did right after, because I was like, oh shoot, if I would have been thinking clearly, I could have actually made things more or done things more effectively and actually made more progress. But I guess that's just part of being human, I guess. But we got to become better, I think, at just identifying those moments when we get heated and being able to control it. That way we don't mess up things that we don't have to mess up. Because there's mistakes. Obviously, we make mistakes in life, but there's certain mistakes that don't have to happen. It's like I've been told that something that I always relate, because I mean, you got to learn by experience. I do think that's true, but there's certain things you don't have to experience. Like some people will say, like, oh, you have to get into a car crash or you have to get a fat ticket in order to become a better driver. I don't think you do. I think if you're mindful of the rules of the road, if you care about yourself and other people, you don't have to cause damage to yourself and other people to learn to be a better driver. There's people who have gone through life without ever getting into like a single accident and will never get into a single accident, and they're pretty good drivers. So I don't think that that's a valid statement in every sense. And we got to remember that even though we are living in the age of the individual, we got to remember the bigger picture, because there's the old saying that says, what is the sea if not a multitude of drops? So if we want to maintain the symbiotic system, we all got to be in a good place, which that goes back into the idea of, like I said, of the age of the individual. Yes, practice self-care, practice being able to examine yourself and what you need, but also care about the needs of others. Don't forget, because this, like I said, this is a very much symbiotic system. There's issues that we think are only going to affect us if we act on them. It's all, I think life is all a domino effect, in the sense that the decisions that we take for ourselves can very much affect other people. And I think it's really prudent to remember that that's the case, because the issues that we create are not all self-contained. It is important to remember the bigger picture of things. Since we are all special in our own way, then that means that the earth has to be a one dang special place. So thanks, guys. That was my episode on fragrance, and I hope that, like I always say, I hope that my words can serve you and be beneficial to you in some way. Thank you for tuning in, and as always, thank you and take care. More content to be coming at you pretty soon, within the next couple of days. We'll see how close I can get by the end of the day tomorrow, actually fulfilling my promise of getting everything updated and stuff. But going forward into season 3, we'll try to be more regular. Like I said, I'll be updating you guys more and more about what's coming in the episodes to come, but potentially a lot more guests to come in the future. Again, thank you and take care. If you like the content of this episode and any of those that we made so far, I'd really appreciate it if you would like, share, and subscribe on any of the networks that I'm available and help this podcast to keep spreading. If you want to interact with me outside of the show, I'm always willing to take your guys' comments and concerns. Head over to my splash page at the 9showpodcast.myportfolio.com. There you'll find all the appropriate links to my show Instagram, to the Facebook, including some other cool jump off points like the blog and others that are currently under construction. Thank you for keeping it locked into the 9 Show Podcast, and as always, thank you and take care.